That is my challenge with PEP.
Yes.
How do you know which ones are good? How do you know which ones have conflicts of interest?
Welcome to the Wise Fiduciary Podcast. I am Isaac Wood, one of your hosts from Fiduciary Wise. Whether you're a thought leader, service provider, CEO, or decision maker, this podcast is for you. We will break down best practices, the services and solutions available to you, discuss the latest topics, and shake up the industry norms. Join us as we explore, challenge, and navigate the future of fiduciary responsibility together. This season, we're doing something a little different, something bolder, something necessary. Because let's face it, the 401k world isn't just about safe harbor notices, 5500s, fund lineups anymore. It's about lawsuits. It's about legislation. It's about ethics and conflicts. And this season, we're putting those controversies under the spotlight. We're not here to push an agenda or tell you which side to be on, but we want to explore both sides of the argument. This is the Fiduciary Frontline. This is the great 401k debate. This is Marta and Isaac fighting all day long.
Fight.
Marta, what are we talking about today?
I don't know. I didn't know I was supposed to bring my boxing gloves. Is that what we're getting?
Let's get ready to rumble.
That's what I was told.
Okay. All right. Props. Next. So today we are going to talk about PEPs. So if you're a plan sponsor, financial advisor, or retirement industry professional, I'm sure you've heard the term PEP thrown around a lot over the last few years, especially since they became available in 2021 as part of the Secure Act. You may have also heard Fred Reich say that in the next 5 to 10 years, PEPs will match single employer plans in new plan adoption. But what exactly is a PEP? Why were they created? And how are they changing the landscape for small and mid-sized businesses? So I'm sure everybody's heard some about them, but just in case, a PEP or a pooled employer plan is a type of multiple employer plan which allows unrelated employers to participate in a single plan that is managed by the pooled plan provider, or PPP or P3. There's all kinds of names out there now. Adopters of those plans, they share most of the service providers like the record keeper, the 338, the TPA. Although arguably there's a lot of very flexible solutions going out there now where there might be a variety of different service providers, but all of those are technically one plan and fall under 15500. They share a plan audit. So the PEP structure is really designed to simplify retirement plan administration, reduce costs through scale, and then shift key fiduciary responsibilities from employers to the professional providers. So are PEPs really living up to their promise?
That's a really good question, Marta. And I think actually the answer to that question really depends on what is it that was promised to you when you were stepping into your PEP relationship. And I think what we'll kind of unpack here is we look at sort of the pros and cons of a PEP. It really depends on what that experience has been. And they're still very new in the industry. There's been a lot of learning that's been done in the industry around PEPs, lots of opportunities to learn. I guess I can't speak to whether or not that learning has always happened, but there's definitely been opportunities to learn and to develop in that space here in these first couple years of PEPs being a thing. But as you were talking through what a PEP was, you were talking about how the PEP structure was designed. And then there was like a list of 3 things there. And you said it was designed to simplify retirement plan administration, reduce costs through scale, and then shift key fiduciary responsibilities from employers to professional providers. All 3 of those things sound like really good things, right? So
yeah,
that seems like a place to start when you're talking about the good that a PEP can provide for you or your plan.
So Do you think that's happening in every PEP?
Oh, no, I don't. And so I don't. So that list of three things is definitely the three things that a PEP should be bringing to the table. I think where you run into challenges in the marketplace is the order at which those are positioned. So if you are looking to join a PEP mainly to reduce costs through scale, you're kind of missing the point of the PEP. I would argue that the by far the leading value of a PEP is the shifting of key fiduciary responsibilities from the employer to professional providers. That should be your motive for joining a PEP. The other two elements of reducing costs through scale, hopefully that's happening when compared to other like 401k setups with all the fiduciary coverages provided, and then also the simplifying of retirement plan administration when compared to 401k plans that are doing all the administration and administrative duties that are required. It gets simplified. I just think when you come in touting that like, hey, it's gonna be less work for you and it's gonna be lower cost and everything's taken care of, that's where those expectations get set in a way that, what if that plan wasn't doing any of the administrative things that were required before? Well, then this isn't going to be simple. There's no simpler administrative duties than not doing anything. So like there are some elements that are required to be done. What if that plan that they're in is just really low cost because they're getting no service from any of the service providers? And it's not being done correctly. There's no options. There's no flexibility. It's like you can't promise all these things without knowing what it is that you're working with.
Okay, so let's go back to your comment about outsourcing the fiduciary pieces and being able to shift that fiduciary responsibility from the employer to the professional providers. There are a lot of PPPs out there these days, maybe hundreds. I haven't checked recently, but people who
I mean, it's hundreds, yeah.
Yeah, so to be a PPP, you have to go onto the DOL website and register. Fiduciary Wise is a PPP. So I know what the process looks like, and you fill out a form and you can be one. So to me, when you're looking at PEPs,
hold on, just real quick. That's about all that's required, right?
Exactly. That's literally all that's required.
Like Michael Scott could go out there and just declare that he's a PPP. Basically, that's all.
And wouldn't he?
I declare bankruptcy.
Exactly.
And
that is all that it takes. And so the DOL is supposed to have some oversight of PPPs, and I'm sure that is coming at some point. But here we are a few years in, and we don't have to do anything special for the DOL besides do our online registration, which we've done. And so what are the criteria to be a PPP, and how many of those hundreds of PPPs really know how to appropriately take on those fiduciary responsibilities?
This is where I feel like we're stumbling upon the tension between PEPs being done properly and bringing value to a plan sponsor. I think I would fall on the side of, if a PEP is done properly, it is of great value to the plan sponsors that it is appropriate for.
How do you know?
Well, there was a lot of caveats that I gave in that statement, right? There's a lot of caveats there, right? And so what we see is that there's a lot of plan sponsors out there with really, really negative experiences with PEPs. And it's only been 3 years. And there is a lot of horror stories about the experiences inside of PEPs that just weren't anything that they were sold. And I think at the core, as you start unpacking those negative experiences, at the core of that is that the PPP and or other service providers in the PEP, they are not executing the heart of what ERISA says the PEP should be. They're executing by the legal standards by which they can. So like anybody can go out there as a PPP and you can sign up and you can be a PPP. Nothing in the law preventing you from doing that, right? And so you can do that.
Right.
Or you can know what it means to be an ERISA 402A named fiduciary, which is the role that a pool plan provider is playing. Know what that means. And when you step out and sign up to be the pool plan provider, you actually understand what it is that ERISA requires of that role, right? There's nothing in the law that says you have to understand what you're doing to be a PPP. But the law does require the output of your work is held to the highest standard under the law, which is ERISA.
Uh-huh.
So if you don't know what you're doing, you're not going to hit it.
Nobody's checking that. So my and obviously we have PEPs at Fiduciary Wise, so I am a little pro PEP, but my con to PEP is there are service providers out there who don't have a lot of fiduciary experience, or maybe they are a record keeper, which has always been a non-fiduciary role, but now they have set up some subsidiary or, joined forces with somebody to be the overall fiduciary for a retirement plan. Like that just seems like I don't know how they accomplish that or how they know how to when that's never been the business that they've been in before.
And that's the biggest. So the biggest con to a PEP is that the PEP that you're going to be joining is not a PEP that's run up to the standards of ERISA.
Right. And how do you know? Because there's no report card out there of PPPs.
Right.
Just give me a great marketing idea for our PPP stuff. We can talk about that later.
I know. Yeah.
But like, how do you know? How do you know what the experience? And maybe that's a question employers could ask is like, how long have you been a PPP? I mean, technically you can only register as of,
you can't have been one for longer than 3. Yeah.
But you could have been a 402A before, which is essentially the same thing. So
listen, Marta, if plan sponsors knew what a 402A named fiduciary was, you and I would drive different cars.
Nice car.
Like that's that's the challenge is at the heart of all challenges in the 401k space is that ERISA exists, and nobody responsible for it really understands that it exists. Most plan sponsors out there, ERISA says you are fiduciarily responsible for this plan, but they don't know that. They don't. Not only do they not know that they are fiduciaries, they definitely don't know how to then go do that up to the standard that ERISA holds them to. And so they are beholden then to service providers to come in and be experts in this space. But right. As is the case in almost every industry out there, just because someone is a member of that industry and they may know more about that industry than you do as the consumer, that does not mean that they actually are an expert in that industry. And so just because a financial advisor comes in and works with 401k plans and works with more 401k plans than you as a plan sponsor have, does not mean that he or she is an expert in all things ERISA. And it's the same thing for all other service providers. Just because a record keeper is in the space doesn't mean that they're an expert in the fiduciary governance of a 401k plan. Just because a third-party administrator does administrative work on thousands of 401k plans doesn't mean that they are an expert in ERISA and the fiduciary responsibilities of being a named fiduciary on a plan, which is what the PPP is. And so those service providers step into like, hey, let's just do this PEP because it's an easy way for us to package the services that we're already doing. It's a great way to market it. And so that was what a bulk of the early adopting PEPs were. And so one of the biggest offenses that we see, right? So every PEP has an audit, right?
Yep.
That's what comes.
I mean, pretty quick,
group
right?
Of plans.
I mean,
it has an audit if it's going to have any participants at all. And so any adopted employer that is joining a PEP is going to be subject to an audit in some capacity, right? And so, again, trying to apply logic to a world that doesn't always use it can sometimes be maddening, right? But if you're a plan sponsor then, and you're a plan that's operating on your own and you don't currently have an audit, you're not an audit size plan, right? You're under 100 participants, you're not an audit size plan. If you then join a PEP, what you are joining then is an audited plan. And so whether you're directly paying expenses tied to that audit, or you're just involved in that audit, or all of your data is now subject to that audit, you're joining an audit scenario. Why would any non-audited plan voluntarily join an audit scenario when they don't have to?
All right. So PEPs haven't failed, in your opinion. Perhaps the marketing of
We
them.
have failed PEPs. Not you and I or Fiduciary wise. The industry failed PEPs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I gotcha. Okay. So let's talk about another kind of downfall of a PEP is a lot of them have conflicts of interest. So we talked about the potential for the PPP to have, be a subsidiary of the record keeper, or we see a lot that are like the TPA, because they arguably have some more knowledge on the fiduciary side. They become the PPP. But in those arrangements, there is a conflict of interest. If I am the PPP and I am also the third-party administrator, I am never going to fire myself. I also might look at my work a little bit differently, or hold that to different standards than I would if it were an outside firm.
Yeah, and it all across the PEP industry, the PEP marketplace, you find those conflicts of interest. And really, it's not necessarily born out of any nefarious attempts to just swindle people.
Sure.
I think a lot of it is just a lack of understanding of ERISA and their views on service providers and what it means. I mean, any service provider being added to a 401k plan is a prohibited transaction. See all of our podcasts on Cunningham versus Cornell, right? And so the scrutiny that bringing on any service provider is under is most people aren't aware of that. And when you start double dipping in certain areas, again, you're not stealing money from the plan, but there is conflicts of interest there. I mean, it can happen for sure. It can happen for sure. And it's easier to do when you're filling multiple spots. And so that's part of what the thought process here is, that to have independent service providers, because it keeps you away from the temptation of danger. And so but so many of these, the PPP is either the record keeper or the TPA, or in some cases the advisory firm, or like there's it's hard to properly fill that named fiduciary role when you've got fingers in other pots.
So ultimately, I think we see a lot of pros to PEPs. I think a lot of the cons we have talked about are more like PEP specific.
It's the execution of delivering a PEP. I personally, I think if you're an audit size plan in a PEP that is being operated correctly under ERISA and providing the value that ERISA wants a PEP to provide, you should be looking at that as a solution.
Okay, here's my argument to that. How do you know?
How do you know? How do I know?
If I'm an employer and I have a retirement plan and I don't know anything about ERISA, but I've got 125 employees and all of them are participating, and so I've got an audit, and I listen to Isaac say you should be exploring a PEP, but only the good ones.
Yep.
There's no guide to help employers sort that out.
You know what? We should write a guide.
Ask an advisor. I love that.
Are you writing a guide? We should write a guide.
I think we could. Because
So
that is my challenge with PEPs, is that there's a million of them out there. How do you know which ones? A million might be a little overestimate, but not by much. I mean, there's a
not by
lot of them
much.
out there. Like,
Yes.
how do you know which ones are good? How do you know which ones have conflicts of interest? How do you identify if the PPP is affiliated with one of the other service providers? How do you uncover the fees? Because the PPP is really the one that's supposed to be managing that. But if they're related to other entities, if they don't really understand what their obligations are under 402, then I don't know. That would make it hard for me as an employer to trust the process.
I think that's a valid response. That if you're a plan sponsor and PEPs exist, you should be interested in them. But to step into that discovery process with eyes wide open to make sure you have a trusted service partner at some point, whether it's advisor or record keeper or TPA or someone that you're already working with that you trust, or consultant in the retirement plan space. But it all starts with the top of the pooled plan provider. And so if you don't have to become an expert as a plan sponsor or as an advisor with clients or a record keeper with clients. You don't necessarily have to become an expert in the fiduciary space to ask the question of, is this pooled plan provider an expert in the fiduciary space? And if you're sitting here listening to this and you're concerned about stepping into the PEP space, listen to our outro of this podcast, because we're going to give you a link to schedule some time with us. We'd be happy to give you some questions to ask a PPP specifically to help determine, are they filling their role in the way that ERISA requires it to do? Because then that will filter down. That will filter down to the other service providers. And so it's just, is your PPP competent or not?
Okay, so I have some comments on what you said, because finding a trusted service provider, like you mentioned, a record keeper, and I don't mean this meanly, but record keepers aren't a fiduciary, and their goal is to earn business. So if
Right.
I'm a record keeper and you trust me, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm doing what's in your best interest. So if I'm XYZ record keeper, and I can say, oh, I have this PEP over here and I make more money on this PEP because we're also affiliated with the PPP, that doesn't give me warm fuzzies. So I like your idea about creating a guide. So if we say it on the podcast, maybe it will actually happen and we can work on that. Because I think, those are conversations that we have with on PEP proposals, is like, how are you different? What is it? And so I think if we could build a guide, because it's tough to make those decisions, especially when you're not in this world, and finding people who, just because they give you a nice consolidated proposal and they say all the right things, doesn't mean it's the best thing.
And they're low cost.
Right.
Doesn't mean that it's the best solution for you. And so I think the PEP conversation, that's why back when we started this conversation, we listed those three elements of value that you can find in a PEP. If the PEP decision-making process does not start with the fiduciary responsibility coverage, you're going to end up in a PEP that isn't properly providing you the fiduciary coverage that you need. And so if you're trying to save money, if you're trying to just not do as much work as possible, we had an example just recently where there was a PEP that was offering, hey, you don't have to send us your census, we'll figure it out. No, you can't do that. It's the PPP. Guess what? That is a lot. That simplifies retirement plan administration successfully, right? Don't send us your census. You don't have to. We're completely relieving you of that administrative duty. We'll just scrub the payroll as it comes in. Guess what? You can't.
You can't do that.
That you cannot fulfill your role as the pooled plan provider by doing that, right? But that plan sponsor says, hey, that's easy for me. So I just led with the administrative. Guess what? Also, that specific PEP was really low cost. with really low cost.
You're right.
You know why? Because that pool plan provider can't possibly fill their fiduciary role. So they're not doing all the work. When you cut corners, you can cut costs. And so
All right, that's fair.
if those other two elements are part of the decision-making process and you're not leading with and making the decision based on the fiduciary responsibilities being adequately covered up to the highest standard under ERISA, then odds are you're going to end up in a PEP that doesn't fulfill all of the promises of a PEP. And maybe you save some money. Maybe you're not working as hard, but you're not fiduciarily covered. So if anything ever hits the fan, you're up creek without a paddle.
So I would like to point out that in our debate style season, there's not always an answer, because some of these things that we will talk about are still
we're going to ask
pending
questions and not give you answers.
How could you do that?
Yeah, exactly. But I do think, I mean, Fiduciary Wise has PEP, so obviously we are pro PEP, but we are pro the right PEP.
We are
So
pro
I think,
doing PEPs the right way.
Yeah.
We're very anti PEPs being done the bad way, the wrong way.
Right. Okay. So we did come to a conclusion on this episode.
Do your PEP correctly and we're pro. Do your PEP incorrectly and we're very con.
I think that's fair.
I like it. All right. PEPs. There's some pro PEP stuff. There's some con PEP stuff. But either way, hopefully that was an engaging and exciting experience for everybody involved. Thank you so much for tuning into the Wise Fiduciary Podcast. We'd love to hear your thoughts and answer your questions. So drop us a comment, send us a message, or schedule a meeting with us at fiduciarywise.com/scheduling. Don't forget to join us next time for more insights and discussions and debates, maybe some fighting.
Well, that's debatable.
Who knows what you'll see, but we will see you in the next episode. Ta-ta for now.